Yeah. Hello, Paul. Welcome.
Hello,
So much
Omri.
for hanging out. Can you just start off by giving me a basic rundown of your experience thus far and your background?
Yeah, so I'm Paul here, and I'm a Filipino composer and researcher. Primarily, I study the music of Southeast Asia, the gong chime traditions of the region. So primarily, gongs and everything from the Philippines, southern Philippines, and also Javanese gamelan is what I primarily study and look at as an ethnomusicologist or a person leaning into ethnomusicology. So a lot of the work that I do is really blending and working with all of these traditions into my practice, also as a composer, not just creatively, but also to engage with the people, communities who create this music.
Mm,
So yeah, so that's basically a short rundown of what I do.
That's really cool. Yeah. So, I'm really always interested to talk to composers, especially composers who work with the voice, because I find that you guys have a rather unique understanding of the instrument. And
Mm,
usually you guys are also singers, so that you
mhm,
understand what you're supposed to do, what are things that are kind of tricky for other singers, and how to create compositions that really speak to the instrument as it
mm,
stands. How has being a singer informed your compositional style?
mm. I guess one way that I can rephrase the question that I think might be in which I can answer it better is how is being a Filipino surrounded by a great singing tradition like
Mhm.
affected the way that um I am deeply related to
Yeah.
singing itself. So as a Filipino, we are surrounded by singing, karaoke and all of that in our daily lives. When we wake up, we hear karaoke. When before we sleep, we try to sleep with the sound of the karaoke sometimes, especially in the area I'm in Manila. So you just learn to have the muscle to sing, if that makes sense,
Mm.
because you're surrounded by it. So the task then becomes understanding the muscle that you have been using throughout your life
Yeah.
and then transforming this into your art form, my art form, as a composer. So instead of wanting to write for the voice, because I want to write for the voice, it's actually rather how do I then transform everything that I've been doing with my voice to be a part of my own expression as a composer. So I view those things as two different things. It's not just because I want to write for the voice, it's because it is a crucial part of my experience.
That's really cool. Yeah, I actually really love that because I think even as singers, right, we fundamentally do separate what we grew up doing. And
Mhm.
when I'm talking to students, I sometimes will ask them, like, did you ever try to imitate bird sounds? Or did
Mm.
you ever do impressions? Like, did you ever play with your voice? Like, did you ever spend any time playing, but like with what your voice could do? And it's
Oh,
interesting to see how many people say no. And
mm,
I'm like, huh, that's kind of interesting. And I wonder, I mean, it's anecdotal, but I've always wondered whether or not there was a connection to people who have a space to play with their voice and then end up feeling confident in their voice later, and those
mm.
who might not have had that same space to play and learn and explore, and if they feel a similar level of confidence or not later in life, with their singing voice. I just have always wondered, it would be
I,
really
I
cool.
mean, I do really think so. There's a fellow pop music scholar of mine who researched about the Philippines using a lot of intonations in daily life, like how they sing. So essentially, when we have what we call barkers in like public transportation, they call for people to go inside their public transport. And what she found out is that a lot of the way that they call out people is actually intoned, and it's not just them, it's also the vendors out in the street. The way that they vocalize, the way that they shout is not purely shouting, there's an element of singing behind it. So in a way, if you're surrounded by people like this, if you hear random shouts like "Wee, wee," or something like that, or then it's all normal.
Yeah.
So it's not, I think a lot of the things about the voice is being comfortable with the weird sounds that you can make. And if you hear those weird sounds all the time, then it's not weird. It's normal. It's fine. It's fun to play with. It's not even playing around. It's just what it is. So when Filipinos um hear a lot of conversations are quite monotone and dull, we find that boring even if it's normal to some other
Mm.
in terms of intonation. And if you listen to Filipino choirs, a lot they use a lot of these particular voices, strategies, and vocalizations, and we find that extremely normal in our choral writing as Filipino composers.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
I actually love that. Yeah, I mean, I think that's really, yeah, I love the voice as a compositional opportunity. Some people might get a little nervous. I do find that I've chatted with some composers who feel almost unsure about taking on the opportunity to compose for the voice. Why do you think it might be beneficial for composers to know more about the voice as it works, and not only necessarily as a singing component, but also as how we communicate with one another? What do you find valuable about that from perspective of writing music?
I think in I can talk easily more about this in pop because I do study pop music as well, right? We take for granted that a lot of pop singers have very unique voices. Like, if you listen to Justin Bieber versus when you listen to, let's say, Celine Dion, or let's say equal or like voice types of same ranges. Let's say we hear Celine Dion or Whitney Houston, right? We can say, okay, soprano, right? But they're different. The voices that they have are different. And I think what many some younger, like let's say early composers may think of is that if it's a soprano, that's the voice type, right? But the thing is, it's not like that. And it's similar. This is a similar argument across all instruments, voices and maybe piano or whatnot. Is that each individual person is a unique, like a musician in themselves. So working with the voice will make it extremely apparent that color is different, the style is different, and different voices will have very different muscles that they've trained that they are very comfortable with at a certain point of their life. And depending on the person, you will have to really adjust what your composition is the more intimate you really get with working with the person. And I really find that the more you tie in their voice, into your composition, the better outcome it will be, as with any other instrument. But I find it to be extremely more noticeable when working with the voice. It's really intimate. It's your body. It's not an external part of you. Well, as a pianist myself, we are taught to play the piano as if it's an extension of our body, of our fingers. But with the voice, it's not an extension of your body, it is your body, right? So it's very intimate in that sense. And writing for the voice makes it very apparent that that's should be the way we should deal with composition with different people. It's not just with an instrument or a particular voice type, but if you're working with a particular person.
Yeah, it's so interesting that you bring that up because people will talk about the differences between certain guitars that guitarists play. They talk about the quality of a Stradivarius. They talk about these different things. What's the difference between a Steinway and any other piano? And it's that timbral change, right? We can hear the difference between different instruments. And obviously, I feel like I do feel like it's even more obvious because it is so easy to tell between certain singers. Some people might argue it's not that easy. That's fine. But I do find it quite easy to hear these different elements because it's not even just the sound of the voice, it's also their patterns and their habits or their personal ornamentation styles. All these things are so unique to each singer and it's almost infinite if you think about it that way. So it's a really cool challenge to write with somebody's voice in mind. At least I think that. As a singer, I love working with composers because I like being able to have this opportunity to talk to someone and be able to see my own voice come alive. Singing other compositions that were not composed for me because they're, in from the past or they were composed for someone else, all that jazz. It's not quite the same. It feels so different to have someone intimately know your voice and then create something that they think fits. I think that's just so special, I
It
think
is.
that's so cool.
I mean, a very great example in history is Benjamin Britten and Peter Pears, right? Benjamin Britten wrote for Peter Pears a lot, and the pieces that he writes for him, beautiful.
Hmm.
You really know it really matches Peter Pears' like voice, and you just really know that he really composed it with him in mind, and it just makes the compositions way more beautiful in that sense. Even if other people will sing it, just having that thought in mind, actually, even if Peter Pears is not the one singing it, we it still makes it more beautiful for me, that thought of having that, oh yeah, that
Yeah.
intimate connection between the two of them is what produced this work.
Yeah. I always liked knowing if a song was written for a specific singer. I think, like you said, it makes it special, and just that extra feeling of collaboration
Mm.
is so cool. And I think that's my favorite part about being a musician in general, is just getting to know other musicians. I love that our job is so social.
Mhm.
And kind of segueing, what do you find is, we've talked about the great parts.
Mhm.
What is the hardest part that you have been navigating about composing for the voice? Do you find that it's different for voice? The challenges of the voice are different than composing for other
Mm.
instruments.
Initially, the one thing I hated about writing for the voice is that you have lyrics. Like initially, like it's because when I was first writing for the voice, when I was a way younger composer, is that, my God, I'm constricted by the poetry. Like the form is there for me. I can't play around with it. This is insane. And it's so hard to find poetry that really speaks to me and all of that. But I think now I find that to be still a bit difficult, but I crave that challenge. Now I search for it. The reason why I really like to write for the voice now, one of the reasons, and why I refuse to write my own lyrics, is because I really like working with other people's words. It's also another layer of collaboration, like interpreting, oh, what did the poet really mean? What did they think about this? And I really want that transmedia, like collaboration when it comes to text, right? So I find it really, instead of being constricted by the lyrics, I find it very easy now to work with it. Like, oh, maybe it would be interesting to play around with the form and this, maybe remove this stanza for now and then move it later on and see how it would change the meaning, and engage with the text by changing the harmony, subverting the expectation or following the expectation of the song text. And what I find before very constricting are actually the things that give me now more freedom, because it allows for conversation. You're not the only one talking anymore. And I think I find that to be not only challenging but deeply gratifying.
Mm.
But it's still a challenge. Like, I'm not saying that I find it fun, therefore it's easy. Like, I find it fun because it's difficult. I
Mm.
think
Mm.
it's
Um,
challenging.
and we kind of briefly, like for a second, brought up communication as one of the really special parts about singing. And it's not like other instruments don't communicate, right? That's 100% not what I'm saying. But the idea of being able to communicate literal words in a musical format is kind of crazy. And it's so
Mm,
complicated. And it adds, like you said, this other layer to what singers slash composers of the voice have to work with. I mean, like you said, the stressfulness of constraint, right? This idea of, like, for example, certain syllables need to be stressed over others, or perhaps a particular vowel is very hard to put in a certain area of the voice, but that's the place where you'd like it to be.
mm,
It's those kinds of little things that pop up, but also make that final product so unbelievably good at being a vehicle for emotional depth and like helping other people navigate their own thoughts, right? It's a great proxy for people's deeper thoughts, to kind of see potentially their own emotions displayed out to them, and they can then perhaps pull that out of themselves and kind of then almost, you know see themselves in the pieces of music.
mm,
And it's really cool. I love the part about being able to communicate literal words, because it's such a challenge as a singer. I mean, a lot of us have our favorite languages to sing in. Um, and I think not only that, we have our favorite ways of communicating, or our favorite styles, whatever makes it feel easiest for us to connect with other people. it's a whole process to discover what that is, right? It looks so different for all of us. So I
Mhm.
love that. I love that a lot.
I mean, for example, there's a vocal tradition, the Philippines called kundiman. The text is really key
Mm,
to singing this tradition, right? Because if you look at the score, nothing much is really given in terms of dynamics, how to sing this, and so it's a lot of it is really okay. So how will I, as a singer or as a pianist, because it's one of the most highly collaborative vocal art song traditions I've ever participated and ever engaged with, is that the vocalist and the accompanist, they really need to collaborate to understand what the text wants,
mm, mm, mm,
because it will really tell them, even though the pitch is already set, the melody is set, but the shaping of it and
mm,
how they move it is really determined by what the text means. It's kind of obvious that some people may choose to subvert the text, but it still works. But you're right. It has to be there has to be a form of conviction with what you want to express, or else it will be, people will feel like, oh, it was half baked, not because it wasn't sung well, but because we didn't feel it.
mm, mm. Yeah, I agree. I think that's, and I talk about this with students actually, is like you have to be very committed to whatever you choose, because if you don't, it ends up coming across a little cheesy,
Mm,
or almost like, the other thing is, how can you tell the difference between a mistake, an actual mistake, and lack of confidence? It's very hard for the audience to tell whether or not you made a mistake or if you just are not sure of yourself.
yeah,
So, in order to prevent that, you should just sing with confidence the whole way through and make that choice, whatever it is. Even if you end up making a choice, maybe halfway through, you're like, yeah, I didn't like that choice. You have to still kind of figure out how to recover and be like,
yeah,
well, I took a risk and I interpreted it that way. And the trial and error component of being able to communicate with one another is almost like what we do as babies, like
yeah.
learning how to talk to each other.
Yeah. For example, the piece that I wrote actually for you, the one with the metal and punk rock
Yeah.
um aspect of Song of the Wonder, um, there were a lot of choices I think that you made there that I think made complete sense. It wasn't what the score called for, I think. Not that I was very specific as to what the score needed at those particular sections, especially towards the end. But I think the decisions you did, especially with how poppy it is, how rocky it is, and is really a key aspect of how why was it so successful? It's because you were just there was a conviction as to this is how I'm gonna do it, right? And it reminds me a lot of when you said mistakes, and like seemingly seeming mistakes. It does remind me a lot of Maria Callas, when she has a lot of things that, oh, that sounds rainy or something like that, but she sings it with such conviction that, even if it's a mistake, it sounds amazing,
I
and it
know, and it
makes
tricks
it more
you.
human.
It tricks you. You're like, I don't know. Then you gaslight yourself into being like, maybe that was how it was written. Like I feel that, and it's that level of commanding of your choices that
Mm,
will. I mean, you can, if you sell it, people will buy it, kind of thing.
yeah.
And it's so hard. I think that might be one of the hardest parts about new music. I loved your piece. It was so
Mhm.
fun, and it pushed me into spaces that, like, I really only have done for fun on karaoke nights. I've really never spent that much time singing some of these genres like metal and stuff. I love listening to it, and maybe I would have it for fun here and there, but I've never actually been able to perform it on a stage with other musicians. So being able to kind of genre bend and, fuse these different things together, the song allowed me to even push my own understandings of the sounds I could make and give me a space to try out sounds that maybe I otherwise wouldn't try, kind of
Mm,
going back to what we were talking about before, is like that playing around, the choices that I made were after me sitting in a room, like messing around, and I'd be like, I don't know what I want to do here. I have to literally try and see what I like. And it's such a, gosh, it's such an empowering experience, and
mhm.
also to hear from a living composer what you want, or like your guidance, or having the opportunity to, I mean, we talked even about spots where I was like, oh, we could do something like this. And, it was just so different than performing music that I can't really I can't tell the composer how I feel, you know.
Yeah.
It's really, really empowering to be able to do new music with people and see your face as we performed. I mean, I remember watching your face as you conduct that piece, and it was really cool to see you, like, as the as we got closer to the completion and we were getting closer to the safe zone, like seeing not just relief, but also like excitement and pride.
Like, oh my God, yes.
Yeah, we did it.
We did it.
We
Yeah.
survived. Yeah, so like that kind of stuff is just like, I think that's like one of the coolest parts about being able to work with a living composer. Kind of scooting around, right? What do you find being what is something that you derive a lot of your inspiration from?
There's a lot of things, right? I think there's not a single answer to that. As human beings, we gather inspiration from so many things. But if there is one thing that has been a constant, I think, like for me, is really my experience of being away from home. I think is a huge thing because there's a lot of reflection there. What does it mean to be a Filipino who has been outside of the country for almost half of my life, like going back and forth? Not in a long period of time, you know. I don't think I'm a part of the diaspora. I don't think so. Like, we're doing this interview. I'm in my room in Quezon City in the Philippines. So it's really that idea of going back and forth. How does that change you? And how does that sound like? How does that sound like to me? And how does it sound like to write a piece of music about something back home that is not close to you physically, but is close to you mentally or emotionally? And you can't really engage with those concepts, those ideas, those people. So I guess that's really where I derive a lot of my inspiration from is this existential idea of what home is.
But of
Yeah,
course.
yeah. It sounds really cheesy, right? It sounds really but I don't want it to be like I don't want to sound like, oh yeah, because it's home. No, it's not about that, I think. I know many people deal with trying to identify what their identity is. I think for me, it's not about a matter of forming what my identity is. I think I'm quite confident in saying that I know that I am a Filipino. I'm secure in my identity as a Filipino. But what I want to really emphasize is that what does that mean, right? Because there are a lot of questions about I'm trying to really figure out my Filipino-ness, right? Like my relationship to Filipino-ness. For me, it's not like that. What does being Filipino in itself, regardless of who you are, like mean? Because it's a highly contested term, right? The only factual thing about it, you're a Filipino because you have some ties with the Philippines. But what does that mean?
Right.
Right? So
Yeah.
so it's a lot about that. That's really where I get a lot of my inspiration from. Not just with being Filipino, but also just in general. It's the moving concept of becoming. And aside from that, another inspiration are my friends, like are my collaborators. Like for example, when I heard you sing, I'm like, okay, you have quite a really wonderful, beautiful voice, and I want to write for your voice. I want to write for you, and what that means is not just writing for your voice, but also writing with you in mind, your experience and what resonates with you, and that feeling of collaboration also gives me inspiration.
That's really good. Yeah, and then you touching on a little bit of your experience with pop music too. You talk about this idea of um, being Filipino as a whole, and I think there's nothing better to explore what a culture is discussing about itself than looking at pop music.
Hmm.
Like I feel like pop music is often disregarded as something trivial or shallow, and I think it couldn't possibly be farther from the truth for the simple purpose of that so many people can consume it and feel connected to it. And I always wonder why, because it is unique per country, per, ethnic identity. It's very driven by the people who listen to it.
Yes.
And so, when you're looking into that, how do you find that researching the pop music of, your target ethnicity, whatever that may be, depending on what you're researching at the time, how does that help to inform your own musicianship? And in this case, your own discovery of being Filipino as a whole.
Yeah. A lot of Filipino musicians who are not in pop. Let me do that first. Who are not in pop. They many of them, especially younger students, something like that. I It's either they really love pop, like I really see the idea, and some of them are even pop musicians, or some of them absolutely hate pop. Like, and oh my god, it's popular, it's something like that. And I really think that like being a pop music scholar made me, and also being a classical musician, all of that, I made me uh like realize why the tension is there. I think it's because of the I think it's not because of just the music itself, but I think it's because of the idea of belongingness, right? The idea of relating to the extra musical ideas found in pop. I think it's not about pop itself, but it's what pop represents. So what popular music represents. Um, for the people who like pop, they like it. It's because not just because it jives really well, especially in the context of the Philippines, but because it resonates with them. It truly does resonate with them. A lot of Filipino pop music is about love. It's about perhaps hardship of life, increasingly, and all of those things, especially in R&B, ballad, and whatever conglomerated genre that is that we call original Filipino music, or OPM, which is the name of the pop genre here. That's conglomerated, agglomerate, whatever that is. So people gravitate towards that because of what it means, what it represents, and also, oddly enough, it's become, I think, the new opium of the masses, right? You work so hard, and it's so hard, and then what do you listen to at the end of the day? Like pop music. Like you really retire to listening to all of this, and you relate so much to this. Like in the past few months, there's this song called Burnout in the Philippines that was released like a decade or two ago. So it's a long time, but it's regaining resurgence like nowadays. The song Burnout, people are like, "What's happening? Like, why are you listening to Burnout again?" And the people who don't listen much to pop, or like younger classical musicians, like, "Oh, pop, like that." I don't know if they resonate with that, with those kinds of messaging, or maybe it's another case of classical, like I think classical is better. um but what does that do with me as a composer is that I think I'm becoming more and more sensitive to what the extra musical material means, rather than just adding pop because it's poppy and it's fun, it's hip, it's vernacular, people will relate to it. I don't think that's how I deal with it. I add it because it makes sense.
Mm.
Like when we did that collaboration with the punk rock pop thing, composition, I didn't add it because I simply wanted to, right? I added it because I've been working in pop music studies for quite a while at that time, and it made sense to me to add it because I was writing about being a wanderer, being away from home, and I think one of the best genres to experience that angst is really metal. You know, so I want to make it make sense, not simply because I just want it to be. Although there's nothing wrong with that too, but that's not gonna be my mode of composing if I ever do that. And
Mm.
so that's a really long-winded way of saying like, oh, how did it affect you? Yeah, so it's the extra musical elements that make pop really wonderful and amazing,
Mm.
that affect the way that I write as a composer and how I borrow it.
Yeah, I love that. And it's always so fascinating to be able to see that, because it does inform a lot of things. And of course, there's opinions that will drive certain things. And I think that being able to identify, uh, the values behind different genres can challenge, the existing canon of artists,
Mhm.
and, encouraging us to recenter ourselves and our identities and also other artists that might not be traditionally associated with the Western canon in a way that allows us to like not only us explore ourselves, but then take the opportunity to share that with others, and then others hopefully finding themselves intrigued. You know, I
Mhm.
love the idea of providing ourselves with our own personal canon of composers or artists that we find really inspiring, and being able to share that with one another through our own creations, taking inspiration from them, and kind of being exactly what we are, which is a hodgepodge of our experiences, and our inspirations are nothing more than just experiences that we've had, right? So I just want to kind of ask you a little bit about your final thoughts about your area of study, and how you feel about your compositions, and a little bit about, yeah, your final parting thoughts.
Ah, many people would like to see that the things that I do as wearing different hats, right? You know, a researcher, ethnomusicologist, composer, and then an educator in music. I all see them as the same. Like, you know, it's a single profession. It's being a musician. It's being an artist. And whether we like it or not, many artists will find themselves in the situation where they try to juggle many hats, and it's just being an artist. Like if an artist cannot be comfortable with the fact that they have to wear many hats, then you know they really have to think hard as to what an artist being an artist really means to them. Because that's really what the call of an artist really is by doing all of these things that we don't imagine we will be doing, and that will look very differently for each and every one of us. And it's similar to the voice. Like you have to be very flexible with particular situations, and you have to be able to sing in various ranges and to work with different things and adjust depending how your voice feels. It's really like that. And you know, what I asked an advice from a choral composer before Jake Runestead. So I asked him, what's your advice to a person who writes for the voice or vocal stuff? One thing that he said is that if you can't sing it, don't write it. It doesn't matter if it's for soprano or whatnot. If you can't sing it, don't write it. It means it's bad. Means it's not coming from who you are. And it's the same with Carolyn Shaw said the same thing, is that if something doesn't feel right, or if it doesn't come, she said, if it comes out of habit, then it will come out of love.
I love that. Yeah.
And she said that in response to like, oh, if you don't feel, I asked because of atonalism and being in the academy and whatnot. And then that's the response that she gave. And, that stuck with me.
Yeah.
And
No,
I think that's the same advice I would give to people.
mm,
Do what makes you feel happy based on habit because it will come out of love.
yeah. And life is short, so you might as
Yeah.
well do what you love, right?
Hmm.
Well, I honestly really loved being able to chat with you. I want to
Yes, me
do
too.
another one, like a follow up. I have been
Yeah.
trying to do follow ups of everybody, but I really appreciate your time. And I
Yes.
look forward to chatting with you on this level about this kind of stuff again really soon.
Of course. Me too.
Thank you. Bye.